compute the value of items received, we need to insert some cells, some columns between the existing columns. So we're going to go to column C. We're going to click that drop down arrow and we're going to choose insert one left. We'll do the same thing at column E. Click the drop down arrow, insert one left. And since column G is after column F, that's enough space that we need. So we do not need to insert one over here. Okay, so we want to make sure that when there's an item selected or item showing up, right, there is going to be the numerical value for that item right next to it. All right, so I'm going to begin by going to this cell. This cell has nothing in there. There was no item 1 in this location. I'm going to go over to the cell that's next to it in the column that I just created, and I will say equal if the cell that's to the left of it, if this cell is equal to this word, or the word that's going to be saved here, if that is true, then we want to submit Alan's bid for the house. So Alan's bid for the house is this, and if that's not true, then put nothing in there. All right, so there's no number that's going to be showing up here. We do the same for Betty. We come to this cell, we'll say equal if the value that's saved here turns out to be equal to the word house, or whatever word that's saved there, comma, then we want to submit Betty's bid for the house, or else do nothing. So we notice the number 120,000, which was Betty's bid for the house, which is the correct value, pops up over there. We do the same thing for Carl. We go to the cell that's to the right of Carl, type equal and we'll say equal if the previous cell, F7, is equal to Carl's bid for the house. I'm sorry, if the previous cell is equal to the word that's saved over here, then submit Carl's bid for the house, or else do nothing. Alright, so once again, you might be saying, well, why am I typing in stuff for cells that are blank right now? Keep in mind, these cells are not going to always be blank. Alright, so that takes care of the house row. I'm going to deal with the boat row. Okay, so I'm going to go to this cell, the cell that I just created, the column I just created, and I'm going to choose to type equal if, open parentheses, so if the previous cell is equal to the word that's saved here, which is boat, then submit Alan's bid for the boat, or else do nothing. I go to E8, I will type equal if this value turns out to be equal to the word that's saved here, then I want to submit Betty's bid for the boat, or else do nothing. And now we see it turns out to be 7,000. That's true. Finally, at G8, I would say equal if the value that's saved there turns out to be equal to the word boat, then I want to submit Carl's bid for the boat, or else do nothing. Alright, one more time. The final row is going to be the car row, which is row 9. I will go to C9. I'll type equal if this value turns out to be equal to the word car, then submit Alan's bid for the car, else do nothing. That works. We go to E9, equal if this value is equal to the word car, whatever word that's going to be stored there, and if that's true, we want to submit Carl's bid, sorry, that was Betty's bid for the car, or else do nothing. And finally, we go over to G9, and we will say equal if the value that's stored in F9 is F9, I'm sorry, I'm working in the wrong row. I went wrong row beneath, apologies. Okay, so this is where I need to be, G9. So G9 equal if the value that's stored here in F9 is equal to the word car, or whatever word that's going to be there, then submit the bid for Carl, or else do nothing. Okay, so that works. Now, the reason why we are attaching the dollar value is because we need to use that for the value of items received. So the value of items received for Alan is going to be the sum of all of the items. So if Alan, for example, won multiple items, then we will just find the sum of these three numbers. All right, in this case, it's just 13,000. So we will go to B11 and we'll say equal sum of these three values. All right, so forget the parentheses. So I got that error, and now we'll select those three. Close parentheses. All right, so the grand total for Alan was 13,000. We go over to Betty, and we'll say equal sum, open parentheses, the sum of these three values. Close parentheses. 127,000, which makes sense. And then we go over to Carl, and we'll say equal sum, open parentheses, the sum of these three values. There's nothing there right now, but that's not always going to be true. All right, so there's nothing. All right, so once that's done, we're going to go ahead and hide the cells that we just introduced. All right, so for example, C, go to the column header, hit the drop down and choose hide column. Go to E, hit the drop down, hit hide column, and go to G, hit the drop down and choose hide column. Okay, so that's perfect. All right, so initial cash received is going to be the difference between the fair share and the value of the items received. So that's an easy computation. So I'll click on initial cash received, and I will say this is going to be equal to the whatever stored in here minus whatever is stored in there. Okay, so that's 31,666 and 67 cents. That's correct. And I'll do the same for the other two. This cell is going to be equal to the fair share minus the value of items received. This cell is going to be equal to the fair share minus the value of items received. Okay, so that's all good. Now the next thing is to figure out the remaining cash. All right, so the remaining cash is going to be the sum of these values, okay, from the cash in the estate. So I need to add these items up, and I need to subtract it from the cash in the estate. So remaining cash is going to be equal to the cash in the estate minus the sum of these three numbers. So sum of these three values, close parentheses. So the remaining cash is $4,333. So the share of the remaining cash is whatever remaining cash in the estate is going to be divided by the number of people in the estate. So for Alan, it's going to be this value. So it's going to be equal to this value divided by 3. For Betty, it's going to be equal to the same thing, this value divided by 3. And for Carl, it's going to be the same thing, this value divided by 3. Okay. All right, so in the final settlement, we have all the information that we're going to need. In the final settlement, so we want to say Alan, so this is equal to Alan. This is going to be equal to whatever player's name is going to be there. In this case, it's Betty, equal to whoever is here. I want to make those once again bold and centered. Okay, so we want to say for under Alan, we're going to have equal to whatever item was won here, so equal to B7. This is going to be for this cell, it's going to be equal to whatever was won here. And it's kind of tricky right now because there's nothing there, right? So it's like, why am I doing this? I can't even see anything. Once again, these things are going to change. All right, so equal to B7, equal to B8, and you guessed it, this one is going to be equal to B9. Okay, so I want these things to be centered, bold, and I'll just change the color this time around. Let's just use blue. Okay, so for Betty it's going to be equal to this, so that's equal to D7 equal to D8, and the last is going to be equal to D9. So these are the items that were won by Betty, Carl, and Alan. This is going to be equal to whatever is here. That's F7 equal to F8 equal to F9. Okay, and the last thing we're going to look at is the dollar amount. So the total that was won, because this is the final settlement, the total that was won will be this. It'll be the sum of these two values, right? So it's going to be the initial cash received plus any share of the remaining cash. So we'll say equal to this cell plus this cell. Initial cash received plus the share of the remaining cash. Alright, so for Betty, it's going to be equal to the initial cash received plus the remaining cash. And for Carl, it's going to be equal to the initial cash received plus any remaining cash. Okay, so I'm going to make this a little bit easier to read and see. I'm going to highlight everything like this. I'm going to once again choose to put a border around it. I would make this a little bit different. I will say let's change the color to white, and it's totally up to you. I'm just doing this to make it a little bit more appealing to my eyes. And this bottom row, you could do this for extra credit, or you could just do it because you like to make it look a little bit more appealing. I would select these three. I will go up to format and choose conditional formatting, and I will say where it says cell not empty, I will change that, and I will say if any of those numbers are less than and less than 0, change the color to red. Alright, so if it shows up as a negative value, do that. And I will add another rule, and I would say if any of those cells turns out to be greater than 0, make it green. Yes, this will work. Okay, so there we have it. So the final settlement. Now this is a fully functional tool, so all we need to change is the seal bit. So for example, if I mess around with the numbers a little bit, if I make Alan the winner of the boat, so I make 7,000, put 7,000 here, and I put 6,000 there, we notice that stuff changes around, right? The winner of the boat in the car is now Alan, and Alan has a larger share of the cash, right, than he had before. Sorry, a smaller share, because he had 33,000, but he won 2 items this time around. So that's the point. We don't want to actually type numbers in here. We want to use